Most ecom founders are obsessed with ads, chasing clicks, tweaking creatives, and hoping their campaign will finally tip the scales. But actual profits? Well, they're still elusive for most.
Once you've seen orders coming in through the ads, then obviously it's proofs that there is a demand. If you would see with English ads that you get 10 plus orders a day, that's interesting to scale a little bit.
Enter Simon. While others live and die by CPMs, he's laser focused on everything that happens before the click. That's why fast-growing D2C brands speed dial him before anyone else.
And we saw that once our client progressed, there is less value in being a middleman of taking care of the sourcing as well. So having a direct factory relationship made more sense than us being stuck there in the middle.
As co-founder of China-based operations powerhouse EcomOps, Simon and his team are trusted internationally by brands that want to scale big, minus the guesswork.
So we're kind of familiar with the journey of itself, leveraging China fulfillment in the right way. That's why we kind of advise our clients so that they can scale.
Join us on today's episode as we explore Simon's playbook for running a global supply chain with just 2 weeks of inventory.
The main thing we care is to have for 2 weeks of inventory in our warehouse. That's the main thing. We don't need more.
The costly factory mistakes founders keep making and how you can avoid them.
That's something that most of the time factories don't even suggest themselves because they think on a purchase order level.
His expert insights on tariffs, freight decisions, and what's around the corner for ecom logistics, as well as proven strategies for taking your brand global without breaking your ops or your sanity.
We didn't care that much about the import tariffs because as long as the Minimis stayed in place, we will be fine.
Trust me when I say this is not an episode you want to miss.
It is kind of also a mindset thing where I'm also really actively helping our clients to also not just be all in on business, but be all in on life. And what does that look like if you're all in on life?
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. Simon, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
Same, happy to be here, Jordan.
Can we just kick off by talking about EcomOps and what you guys do?
Yeah, so the core of the business is China fulfillment, which basically is 5 warehouses in China where we have inventory and where we do the pick and pack for Western e-commerce brands. These brands already have a factory or we help them find a factory, get the goods to our warehouse and order. All the orders come into our system. We do the pick and pack and then distribute all the orders globally to the end consumer.
Okay, and how is this kind of different from other suppliers and logistics players in the market?
Yeah, we get that a lot. So we see this, we originally was more like a drop shipping agent where you take care of both the sourcing and the fulfillment. And we saw that once our client progressed, there is less value in being a middleman of taking care of the sourcing as well. So having a direct factory relationship made more sense than us being stuck there in the middle. Therefore, we decided to kind of focus on the fulfillment side of it only. So the growing clients, they had a fulfillment need. They're not going to open a warehouse in China to be able to take care of their orders. So that need was still there. And as our clients grew, we decided to go into that direction. And on top of that, we kind of created logistics plus advisory because all our management team has run multiple businesses in the e-commerce space. So we're kind of familiar with the journey of itself, of starting off as a dropshipper or as a small brand or even as a global brand, leveraging China fulfillment in the right way. That's why we kind of advise our clients so that they can scale. And that's kind of our value, not so much of getting new clients on board all the time just to secure your base volume, but to basically help and evolve our existing clients so they scale. And then when they win, technically we win because the more orders we do, the better.
Does that mean that there's kind of a certain size that brands must be to kind of make sense working with you?
Yeah, we normally say 50 orders a day minimum, which also is something that you can really build something impactful on top of by just optimizing the supply chain. If it's less, it's less likely to really optimize. And then we see certain categories, product categories that are less of a fit because we want to have a lean warehouse where we have continuously inbound and continuous outbound. So we don't want to be a storage location. We want to be really a fulfillment location. For some categories, such as fashion, it's very hard to have that continuous flow of in and out because some styles, some colors, some sizes just don't sell well. So we really focus on consumer products, electronics, pet products, well-being, travel, those physical products that are also tend to be less than a kilo per item, just to be able to have the full efficiency of fulfillment from China.
Okay, nice. And is there kind of a ceiling or a kind of top range that you would say kind of brands should work with you before kind of, maybe going direct, or do you just, continue working with brands all the way?
Yeah, normally that's also kind of like once you're going to do, like once you're doing 30 orders a day, then and it's an identical product, so not so much diversity, so you don't have to have multiple suppliers, but 30 orders a day that could come from one factory. It makes sense to build that relationship for different reasons. One, it is to be able to look the owner in the eye and also knowing who you're talking to, because most of the time you're talking to a salesperson, not per se the owner of the factory. The other one is to get an understanding of how these products are actually made, getting an understanding of the capacity in the factory in itself. How many items can they do on a daily basis? What are the raw materials? Which materials can we improve to actually make the product a better product quality? What are the price negotiations? What are my payment terms? So all these things with a middleman, it's much more difficult to actually have that in place. And by tapping into the factory directly, or having someone in the middle that's actually very transparent of giving you access to that factory, that has been a game changer, because you have to realize as well that a lot of the e-com brands have never seen their factory. They've never seen how a product has produced. They've seen a sample because they get a sample in hand, but they never seen boxes or pallets full of their products being produced with the team, with the factory workers making it. And I think that's been an eye opener for most of our clients. The first time they came to China, and even the second time, making the actual visit, having the actual relationship with the factory has been a true game changer for them.
Yeah. And is this kind of where I guess your value comes in? Is you're working with someone or starting to work with someone that's a proven concept, and then you're kind of taking them out, optimizing all these other variables and building those relationships with factories. Is that the real kind of value add aside from the kind of obvious service that you provide?
Yeah, that's what at least we believe, and what our clients luckily also say is we've put our clients in three different client types. One is a former dropshipper that is turning into a brand. Two is a brand that wants to expand with more products, more countries, more geographics. Three is a multi-brand owner running multiple fulfillments across the globe, using us for the China fulfillment part. Each of these three types have their own hurdles, their own bottlenecks, and each of them have that. Therefore, we can prep them based on their journey. Because of active communication, we are basically do a lot of hand holding and say, look, I think you're going to get stuck here. This is how you can get unstuck. Or you should talk to, whether it's an existing client or partner, to help you progress further. These kind of tweaks have been crucial for us to be able to elevate the game for our clients, because then most of the time you're not seeing it yourself. You're kind of in a tunnel vision, scaling, growing, hustling, trying to make it work, and then sometimes you're oblivious to what actually does work. And these tweaks, are game changers.
Okay. And you mentioned before, kind of you and your partners have like a variety of kind of knowledge, and that's where this kind of comes from. What was your kind of background before starting this business? Because it is quite niche, right, to the outsider.
Yeah, it's a niche in a niche in itself. I've lived in China from 2011 to 2021, so 10 years. And there I was involved with small parcels, shipping small parcels out of China. So I was representing the Dutch postal company to be able to tap into the industry, the market there, and find clients. Basically, clients like AliExpress, also Yun Express, they all became clients of PostNL back 2011 onwards till basically 2018. I was heavily involved with that to be able to grow the presence. And then you saw at that time there was only the space for express companies like FedEx, UPS, DHL, or China Post. There was nothing in the middle. You probably remember these at least 30-day shipping times to get something from China till the end destination. We try to make that difference, and I think we've had a huge contribution to be able to position ourselves in the middle, where you can actually have 5 to 10 days delivery. and then get to global destinations for an affordable price. So because UnExpress was one of our clients, they kind of upgraded the solution by having direct injection all across the globe, picking up from our clients while using the last mile rate card of the postal company. So my background then became also more like, well, how can I add more value in the supply chain? And then it became the custom clearance part. So I invested in a company who did custom clearance in Europe, and that also evolved from my understanding of how does that work for Amazon shipments or for small parcel clearance into the EU. What is the difficulties? How can we improve the flow of the data? And then once that became more clear, then I started to think, okay, I understand the supply chain. I also done sourcing from factories for trading companies. So I've been to hundreds of factories, seeing the products, how they're being produced. So I understand the factory, I understand the logistics. I didn't really understand the owner, the Ecom brand owner. Therefore, for the last 5 years, I've been evolved in whether it's a drop shipping service and now more like a fulfillment service from China to get the nuance clear. What's going to help an ecom brand to scale, and how should we optimize the supply chain for them, knowing everything that I've learned over the past 15 years almost.
And how do you kind of boil that down? Like, how do you get the value prop across to them?
Yeah.
What have you found to be the best way to do that?
So when it comes to the sourcing part, is to be very clear on not placing a huge order, but placing batch orders. So not placing 10,000 pieces, but placing orders for, let's say, 2 or 3,000 pieces. But what you could do is for these 10,000 pieces already buy the raw materials in advance, meaning that there is no delay in the lead time, especially when you know, let's say the factory produces 1,000 pieces a day, your batch order is 3,000, then every 3 days send 3,000 pieces to our warehouse. Then you only pay the full price for the product once it leaves the factory warehouse. That's something that most of the time factories don't even suggest themselves because they think on a purchase order level. They just want to get the biggest possible order for themselves because that's their KPI. And the ecom brand owner doesn't know enough how a factory works to be able to even ask that question. If the factory doesn't bring it up, who is? So that kind of positioning has helped us a lot for the sourcing part. For the logistics part, it's pretty much shipping lines. Using reliable shipping lines. There are so many agents out there that are saying, okay, we have a line, it's very cheap, or yeah, we can ship supplements. Yes, we can do it. Everything is yes and possible, but there is no guarantee that it's going to arrive and at what speed, and it can really be destructive for the brand itself. So we really want to make sure that the lines that we're using are reliable, are sustainable, and not going to result into any holds or issues along the way, because that's very damaging if you're building a long-term brand.
And in terms of that shipping and logistics piece, are you bulk shipping from China, or is it kind of individual item?
These are individual items that are then consolidated into one shipment to different destinations. So each destination, so the US has 7 injection points, and then different countries have different injection points in itself. Sometimes in Europe, it first go to Netherlands, and from Netherlands by truck to Scandinavia. So it depends a little bit on per country what the line haul is and what's the most optimized line haul. But we always do on order level. So we get the order, we pack the order, and then we label it. Then players like UnExpress or 4PX or Yen, when they come pick up from our warehouse on a daily basis, they then do the sortation. So they have a big conveyor belt with the sortation on the different destinations, the different shipping lines, the different last mile. And then it's going to go by air, most of the time through Hong Kong to the last mile destination.
And roughly what's the kind of lead time maybe for kind of US and Europe separately from, that order being placed to delivery?
Yeah, so UK is the fastest. So right now is that actually 4 to 7 days, because there's also a lot of line hauls from Hong Kong originally, historically, from Hong Kong to London and back. So that one is actually the fastest. Normally, US depends a bit on the shipping line, but it's 5 to 10 days. These are calendar days. So now it's not per se as business days, it's calendar days. Because the delivery happening Monday to Saturday, and our warehouse also Monday to Saturday. Western Europe is 5 to 8 days. When it comes to the Nordics, it tends to be longer, 8 to 12 days. So actually, the further away you go from Western Europe, the longer it takes. So the longest is probably 8 to 12 days, and then Western Europe, France, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium is all 5 to 8 days.
Okay, that's pretty quick, right?
Yeah, that's pretty quick, and I think that's why, and it's only going to get quicker. So one of the ambitions for a Chinese logistic company is to have global delivery in 72 hours, which basically is 3 days, which is not there yet, but that ambition shows that where it's going to go towards in the coming years. Now we're the fastest is 4 days, what we've seen, and then 4 days is some people ask, like, is that really realistic? Well, if we get the order this morning, we fulfill today, tonight is going to go to the airport in Hong Kong, the next day is going to fly, and then it's going to arrive on day 3, where there's a local injection and delivery. So in essence, if the data is correct and is shared timely, which is happening because already the data of what's inside the parcel is shared when it's in the air, before it's arriving at the destination. So everything can already be happening, even though the parcel is not there, when it comes to custom clearance, preparing what's coming, getting the truck ready, and having it ready for the last mile delivery. So I do think in the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to be 3 to 5 days. There's going to be a lot of competition coming up because all these Chinese companies that no one in the rest of the world has heard of are going to compete with all the last mile destinations in the main Western countries, which is going to be an interesting battle to watch, but that's going to be the consumer benefiting from it. This is why we also really focus on China fulfillment. When your product is produced in China, the source is China, and optimizing that flow of inventory is a game changer because you don't have to put any inventory on a boat for 2 or 3 months waiting for it to arrive and then start selling. If the lead time becomes indeed, the transit time is 3 to 5 days, then there's less need for a local warehouse to play any role in itself.
And you think, like, 3 to 5 years is a possible timeline to achieve that, because that's
Yeah.
an insane goal, right?
It's been in the works for the past 5 years already, and it's already, you see it already going from 30 days before to 20 days to 10 days to 5 days. So how much more can you make it shorter? Then just from a logical point of view, I know the process. I know the shortest time is 3 days. It cannot be faster. So, and we see some of the tracking numbers actually having close to 3 days, 4 days. So in that sense, especially when you have the inventory there, which is the biggest downside of drop shipping, right? Once you scale and you don't have inventory, you lose the lead time. The lead time is going to weigh on your transit time. If you have the inventory there, it's just a matter of pick and pack, getting it out, getting it in the air, and getting it delivered.
Okay. I want to play kind of devil's advocate for a second. Is there any product or category you can think of where it's better to ship by sea?
Yes, mainly bulkier products. So when it's over 1 kilo products, or just the dimensions of it are bigger, dog beds, those kind of like lamps, those kind of categories. But we do think that our advice is actually for clients that have a few products that's scaling really well. Let's say in the US, they have the best selling products in the US. Look for local inventory, look for a local warehouse, and find this hybrid model where you have local inventory for next day delivery or close to next day, where you can also offer that as an express shipping line at a higher price to the end consumer. So the consumer has a choice. They can have a free shipping option from China, or they can have an express shipping with a surcharge locally. Some people need it for their birthday or whatever. So it's a mature brand has the option to do one or the other. And that, obviously that's hurting our volume, right? Because that's not going to help China fulfillment by having inventory in the US warehouse, because we don't really touch that part. But it's not about us. If the brand becomes mature, let's say the US, it's far more easier for them to scale outside of the US because they build up the credibility that comes with it. That's going to be their next stage, basically, to be able to become a global brand. So for us, we see that as like an honest advice of what will be best for them. And we do believe that eventually we will benefit from that.
Okay, so they should keep like a certain percentage of inventory
Yeah, it's always hard to predict, and you're always off. When you put inventory in a US warehouse or any warehouse, your predictions are always off. So therefore, you have to kind of an optimized supply chain where you run out of stock, use China. You launch a new product, use China. Go to other geographics, use China. You want to just you're gonna sell at least 20,000 pieces, up and sell it locally. Once you run out, just continue to fulfill from China. We see that most of the time this kind of nuance is more during Chinese New Year period and Q4, where it just makes more sense to be able to continue selling and having some local inventory. But the rest of the year, low season times, basically now till end of September, it is not that necessary to have local inventory unless you want to have that solution and you reach a certain scale of 8-figure brands. Normally, from 8-figure brands, it makes sense to have that mix of hybrid fulfillment. Once you're below that, not so much.
Okay. In terms of, we're talking air freight, 5 to 10 day lead time from China to Europe and the US. What would you say for sea freight? What is the kind of current time, and are there goals as there are with kind of air freight to shorten that in the next couple of years?
So for sea freight, it's harder to get a shorter time than now. So most of the time, to Europe is like you have different boats, but 20 to 40 days is pretty standard. And if you don't have a full container load, you have to wait until you have to have your goods ready earlier so that they can fill one container. So you're like a limited container load. You have a piece of the container. You have to wait until the container is full, and then you can be shipped out. So in that sense, the lead time is a little bit longer, even if you don't have a full container to ship out. Therefore, we also think once you have a certain size and you do full containers, it makes sense to have a local supply chain and local warehouse, etc. So normally you have these already 20 to 40 days. Then the lead time of the products to have to fill up a whole container also takes 30 to 45 days. So overall, you're already talking to at least 2 months, most of the time 3 months of goods to arrive in a warehouse. And you need to plan your inventory ahead of time. So that means you pretty much have to plan 6 months ahead, which is a huge headache, in my opinion, to be able to predict that right and not get into a squeeze. Which style, which one will sell well 6 months from now is hard to predict. So that kind of lean supply chain is where we come in.
I spoke to a brand the other day, and they mentioned they were using rail freight.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you see that a lot? Is that common?
Yeah, at least for you have the one belt, one road, which has been on the political agenda in China as well, where they're trying to stimulate train distributions mainly from China to the rest of the world. The train is pretty much empty when it comes back to China, so it's definitely from China to the rest of the world. Where it's going, which is a little bit more tricky now. There was one line going through Russia, which is pretty much on pause, and then there's another line that is going more south. So these lines they take about 2 to 3 weeks in itself. So over 4 to 6 weeks, that's a bit it's a difference. It is about 1.5 times to 2 times more expensive than a boat. So roughly double the price of a boat, but it gets there quicker. So for Europe destinations, in general, it's fine to use the train if you need it to be a little bit quicker, but it's not that much quicker to really move the needle. But normally it tends to arrive by train. It can go all the way to the Netherlands, Belgium, even I think UK. But normally it stops in Poland, and then Poland it goes into a next network. There's the containers are offloaded and then handed over to different cargo trains. So there's a lot of there's the difficulty of the rail is that not all the railways are of the exact same size. So you sometimes have to move containers up to another train. But it's been evolving a lot in the past 8 years or so. It's heavily subsidized as well by the Chinese government. It's kind of like a way out. Besides the ocean freight, I always think, and I heard a podcast of a military service guy who said the reason why China is doing this is that if there's going to be a war, and I hope never happens with Taiwan, then the sea will be blocked and they need a way out. So whether it's going through by train is then a great alternative because most of the airports will also be blocked. And then it goes, and now the connectivity to Southeast Asia by train is also getting better and better. So they're heavily investing in building the train network. I was in Thailand the other day. You can just see the constructions happening and ask them locally, like, what is this for? This is just Chinese companies building the connectivity into Thailand in itself. So it's definitely gonna be interesting, but it obviously is not gonna reach the US. It's mainly for diversifying into other geographic regions.
Okay, so it's a good alternative for perhaps kind of European sea freight.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is.
I feel like it's difficult to talk supply chain at the minute without discussing the US and Trump. Can you just kind of explain super high level? We are recording this towards the end of May. What is the current situation and how has that kind of impacted things your end?
So the current situation is that the minimis is off the table, meaning everything under $800 are no longer exempted from taxes and duties, which for everyone shipping parcels from China, that's the big game changer. That's the main thing that we were focused on from the beginning. We didn't care that much about the import tariffs because as long as the de minimis stayed in place, we would be fine. There would be no to zero, no to limited impact. As that one went away, that means everything is subject to tariffs in itself, and that obviously complicate things because the original shipping lines that have been used for years cannot no longer be used. So new shipping lines, clearance methods, basically had to be implemented that have never been tested before. That was the main uncertainty when the 2nd of May basically started, is that you want to run an e-commerce business shipping parcels out of China at scale for a clearance method that has never been tested at scale. That's where we've been so cautious as well, by advising our clients even to pause during that transition time, just to be able to get validation from the market that nothing is getting stuck, your brand is not impacted, you can just continue as normal. And we've seen now in the last 2 weeks that continuing as normal, still a higher price than normal, is fine. The transit times are pretty much similar. The data that we collect are clear as well, such as what's the cost of goods for the purchase, the HTS codes, just the legality of it in itself was a biggest concern. So our concern was from two standard points. One was operational. Will the parcels get stuck? And how can we prepare for that? And the other one is the legal part. Is there any legal risk for our clients, for ourselves, for our team members that are based in the US? So up to now, we don't see that. We see that once you have the data in place, especially because our clients are buying in bulk, they have the proper invoice, they have all the codes available. So actually we can have a green flow of data, which for dropshipping is much more difficult to establish. So I think we got lucky in that sense with our pivot into China fulfillment. And in the next, at least the next, 60 days left, it's supposed to stay the same. So the tariffs went down from 145 to 30%, which is still a lot, but it's much less than before. And then by the end, 60 days from now, needs to be a decision made on how to proceed. The rumors that we get is that it's going to stay similar to what it is right now. So close to the 30%, unless obviously Trump changes his mind. But that's kind of like nobody really can control that. What it is, it's been targeted directly at China. So obviously that has impact not just for us, but for the industry itself. Everyone shipping from China is impacted by it. But we're not seeing it as a super negative thing. It's just now there's 2 extra ways of clearing goods into the US that didn't exist before or weren't used before. And now actually we have options. We have more options than we ever had before to do it in a compliant way. And that's something that we care the most about, is not just getting loophole solutions, gray solutions, but actually things that follow the law and build a brand. And most of our clients, they've obviously been impacted by it, by just either pausing or having to increase their price. But these are becoming, our clients are legit brands that actually increasing the price with $5 or $10 doesn't have that much of an impact, especially now during times where a lot of people slowed down their advertising in the US. Their ROAS went up and their margin went up because they just had more left in profits. So in that sense, it's not per se a bad thing. It's also a good test to see, are you a mature brand or are you just really looking for profit margins all the time?
And what would you say to kind of brand owners that, I don't want to say panicking, but I think on ice, putting off making decisions? What would you say to those guys?
I mean, get informed. And we've shared. We had webinars. The recordings are also available. If you go to the X profile from former Twitter, so X from Dayu Yan, our CEO, he has daily updates during the import tariffs time. Whenever there's an update, he's the guy to follow, I would say. And there's a webinar where we actually go through all these aspects of the legality, the operations. What are your solutions? What are the options? What do we see in the market happening? What are the transit times? Are there delays? What are the delays? Why are they there? So all this information is just based on real data. It's not about our guesses. It's actually what we see happening, which for us gives enough confidence that now, end of May, we don't see any issue of holding your shipments to the US. We don't see a risk of not scaling into the US again. We were cautious throughout the first 2 weeks of May, but I think for good reasons, because we're trying to protect our client. Obviously, it's impacting us a lot. We're saying pause fulfillment, don't ship anything to the US. But we do see this as something that this is the moments where you build the trust, where you say, we don't know what's going to happen. It could go really bad for your brand. Our advice is to pause, and now our advice is continue and start scaling back up. But do consider other regions and start testing it, even with English ads. Start testing whether there's a potential for you outside of the US border, because that's definitely an interesting development itself. The focus of global brands are going into other regions other than the US.
Interesting. And that actually brings me on to my next point. So I think the majority of your business, 60%, is US based. Is that correct?
It's going to the US, yes. Not per se the clients are based there, but yeah, the volume is going, yes.
If a brand is, doing well in the US and they're looking at other regions, are there any that you kind of recommend they look at first?
Yeah, so obviously the main four English speaking countries that are is kind of standard, right? Canada, Australia, UK, alongside with the US, then maybe New Zealand. We do see also Southeast Asia really picking up. Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, which you can still run really well with English brands, with English advertising. Sorry. For Europe, if you've done, like, let's say, 1 million plus in the US, you can start testing Europe with English ads just to be able to test if there's a demand in itself. If you're below that 1 million, don't really make sense to do it, because then you have to really localize. You have to really pick one country, translate everything, make everything localized, customized, which doesn't always move the needle as fast. So it is really about the timing. So best to first go to English speaking, maybe Southeast Asia, and then start adding European regions and mainly Western Europe. It tends to be used most when Netherlands, Belgium, France, Luxembourg, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, that batch, that's most commonly scaled to afterwards.
Okay. And you mentioned there kind of starting off, just copying and pasting the kind of English copy or whatever.
Yeah.
At what point does it make sense to actually localize, and what steps should brands take to localize if they have seen success? I'm assuming in their kind of Anglo.
Yeah, so once you've seen orders coming in through the ads, then obviously it's proofs that there is a demand, which then proves to actually invest a bit more in localizing that, having a local setup, whether it's an entity or whether it's just customer service or whether it's localized language of the website itself. So Shopify can facilitate a lot of these things as well in itself to just be able to go to the next step. So normally, if you would see with English ads that you get 10 plus orders a day, then actually it's for that specific country. That's interesting to scale a little bit, scale your ads a little bit for that country, see if that still remains healthy, for you to validate that there's a market for you. And this is kind of these small tweaks for you to be able to first establish, is there a demand? If the answer is yes, there is a demand, okay, then scale it up step by step, and then actually start growing and investing into localization.
Okay. And I guess the flip side to this is, a brand might spread themselves too thin, especially if they've got a small team.
Yeah.
At what point would you say it makes sense to start looking at other regions instead of focusing on the kind of main one?
Yeah. Normally, I would say like 100 orders a day minimum to be able just to get a stable 100 orders a day for, let's say, for two months. So once you've achieved that, then actually most of the time the curve of the hype is 4 to 6 weeks. So once you pass the hype and no one else is jumping on your trend, and you'll be able to really make a unique positioning after 2 months, you actually see that there's value for you in the local market. Then obviously there's so many ways to still optimize for that local market. That's why a lot of people just, especially US, as big as it is, people just focus on that before they even launching outside of the US. So we have clients that had thousands of orders a day in the US before they start scaling globally. If it's just you running it as a solopreneur, it's better to just go focusing on scaling that 100 orders to 1,000 in that country instead of adding more. If you do have a team around you with a VA or with a customer service or with somebody running your ads, then it makes much more sense to give them instructions, because in the end, scaling globally is obviously having the lines open to these countries, but it's mainly how do I get the traffic. So if you need to run your ads and build that and manage that yourself, that's a huge task. So if you don't have the resources, I would suggest to focus on one country, scale that to the max, maybe launch a new product in that niche alongside of it instead of going to another country per se.
Okay, interesting. And I guess there are kind of other options, right? You touched on it there. You don't just need to expand internationally. You can launch, other products, other categories, and
Yeah.
maybe take that route for growth.
Yeah, so we see that everyone has a one best selling
Yeah.
product, which normally is also the first product they started with or they found as being successful. And then is they're looking for either upsells to test if there's more. Probably our top 20 clients, each brand, some of our clients have multiple brands, but each brand has 2 to 10 SKUs. And with SKUs, it's just a unique product. So not per se on when it comes to color or when it comes to certain features, but it's very limited. It's not a really, you don't have to fill up your store to become a global brand, which a lot of people think is that just need to have a multi-product store, throw as much of products on there to be able to build that. No, you don't. It's fine to have 1 to 5 products or even 2 products to start with, just to be able to validate what your audience would like to see next. What is the next product that could be is supplementary to that winning product, and build on top of that. And that's a gradual process. While you improve the existing product, that is the best selling one, with branding, with features, with quality, with pricing, with everything that comes with it. How do I then add another product to it? And most of the time, they do maybe do 1 or 2 extra product new launches every year. So it's not just going find these 10 new products to launch every week. It's actually much more mindful, much more thoughtful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you touched on launches there. I want to talk about a linked point to that, which is inventory planning. I feel like this is a overlooked aspect of building a business in the e-com space. How do you advise brand owners think through inventory planning?
Yeah. When it comes to the China fulfillment part, the main thing we care is to have for 2 weeks of inventory in our warehouse. That's the main thing. We don't need more. And the 2 weeks inventory is normally enough unless you start scaling your ads or you're going to do something to be able to have a momentum. So for that, it's very important for us to inform us in advance that 2 weeks then can be more than 2 weeks. So that because we can only predict based on historical data. So that means that you have to have a very lean supply chain where we want to be in contact directly with your factory, meaning that there is already inventory in the factory or there's a plan of having inventory in the factory, so that for us, we can say, hey, we're running out of this one. Please send the next batch to us today or tomorrow. And normally it's within 1 to 3 days the inventory is in our warehouse, and we continue to run. Too many of the factories, they have an MOQ of, let's say, 10,000 pieces, and then the brand thinks they have to buy 10,000 pieces and send all 10,000 at once to us. They don't have to. The factory would like to, but they don't have to. So actually, they don't have to have these 10,000 ready. Like what I said before, is having the raw materials ready, having the production, and having regular deliveries so that we continue to have 2 to 3 weeks of inventory in our warehouse. That opens up huge cash flow opportunities. You no longer have to prepay everything that comes to a warehouse. You only pay what's leaving the factory. And what's leaving the factory, you know already is going to sell out within a few weeks, which is a big game changer for most of them, because cash flow is the biggest squeeze when you're scaling your brand. It's not per se the inventory, it's the cash flow and maybe the lack of planning that comes with the inventory. So even though you've managed everything well, you also have the cash, but you haven't planned your inventory, you're still going to get stuck. So it's cash flow and inventory planning that's going to decide whether you can succeed or not.
Okay. And how do, let's take a first time brand owner, how do they go about having this kind of conversation with the factory? And is this something you would kind of step in and help with?
Yeah, we do more hand holding, especially when we advise all of our clients to come to China. So either during the Canton fair in April or in October, combine that with a factory visit, the factories they work with, and also come to our warehouse. And normally we have a networking event as well with other ecom brands, so that they can just get outside of their box, get more familiar with other products are out there, get some conversation with other suppliers going, but also get a deeper understanding of the factory. If they haven't done that, it's very hard to have a detailed conversation with a factory. So most of the time we're pushing our clients, are you coming this year? If so, let's go through your plan. Where are you going to go? Oh, you're only going to visit one factory? Add two. Just go find two more factories to visit, either nearby or make another separate visit. It's going to help you to understand your product possibilities, because most of the time the most expert person about your product is not the brand owner. It tends to be the factory. The factory has done so many different kinds of products produced for global retail that they know exactly how they can tweak the product to make it a better product. And that's something that is so immensely valuable and overlooked. So it's a lot of hand holding for the first time. Once they've done the second time, they know exactly what the value is. We don't have to tell them anymore, and they just make their own schedule and ask us, so when is your next event? I will be there for the account fair. So yeah.
Very cool. On that kind of multiple factories point, is that kind of building out relationships or having multiple people supply you, or what is the kind of purpose of talking to multiple factories?
Well, every product can be produced by multiple factories, and there's a huge difference between the quality of the factories. And some of the bigger factories, they have also higher standards, but also higher MOQs. So if you're starting off as a brand, you don't meet these kind of MOQs yet. So it's hard for you to find these big factories to even work with you. So therefore, you will have to also find out, okay, I'm just going to start smaller, and it tends to be also a smaller factory, but they're much more accustomed to your production. But once you scale, they run out of capacity. They cannot meet your demand anymore. So you need to have a backup. So therefore, you will have to invest already. What's going to be my backup factory in case something gets stuck? Because a lot of factories don't tell you as a brand, they don't have the supply. They just pretend that nothing is wrong. So having a backup option within the same product is a good one. But also, if you're going to go in your niche, there might be that you have, let's say, you do sunglasses and you want to have sunscreen. That's not going to be the same factory producing these two products. The same for bags, and you want to have like an accessory, even with the bag. Sometimes it's not the same factory. And so for each of these product categories, the category might be more multiple factories to be able to do it, because the factory in itself, they're normally limited by the raw material that's being used. It's either plastic or it's steel or it's aluminum or it's fabric or whatever that might be. So from that perspective, looking for your next product in your niche, it's good to have that. That's why I think the Canton Fair is so good to explore, get ideas. What else is out there within my niche? And then you will start to, at some point, you don't have to go there anymore. Then you know already what it is your brand needs for new products, and you know your way to get there.
Okay. And would you recommend the Canton Fair as the place to find those new factories?
Yeah, it's one way. I think Canton Fair is mainly for inspiration to also validate whether you have the right prices with your suppliers, what payment terms are possible, what are the quality differences in itself within your product. Because you're selling an online product, and sometimes you don't even know exactly what an upgraded product looks like. So for that, I think it's for market research. It's great. Obviously, you get in contact with some of these factories, but a booth is not a representation of the factory itself. You really have to visit them to see, like, is it a trading company, is the factory name also the same name as that's on my invoices. So there is always a big research that you have to do as well throughout that. But for fact finding, market research, I think it's a great event, especially if you combine it with a factory visit, building relationships there, and getting educated.
Okay. So how would you find the perfect factory, and what's the process for that?
Yeah, you cannot find a perfect factory from day one. Some might be, then it's just lucky. I think the main thing is being very clear on your requirements, because most of the time we're not we want, yeah, I want the best price with the best quality. What does that mean? What is the best price? What is the best quality? So if you don't really have prepared for yourself, and you have asked quotes from different factories, and you say, okay, I think this is a rough estimate price, between this range the price should be, these are the quality differences. I've seen 7 samples. Of these 7 samples, I like this one of this, that one of that one of this. So you build up your product requirements. The factory will take you far more seriously if you say, I want a product for around this price with these requirements. What would be your price, and what would be the delivery time and the MOQ? They would take you far more seriously than saying, like, I got it 1 cent cheaper somewhere else. Okay, but what did they offer you? Did they offer you the exact same? I don't know. They gave me a price, but for what? So that's a very big difference, because everything is available in China. Everything is available for very high quality, high cost, low quality, low cost, and everything in between.
Okay. And before you have these conversations, obviously you need to find these guys. Where do you recommend going once you have the kind of product idea and the rough specifications? Where would you find factories that could help you with that?
Well, you either use a sourcing company, or that's going to help you find these factories, or you're going to go look on Alibaba.com, or even AliExpress, or 1688, or you're going to go to global sources. So there are a lot of websites where you can still get in touch. The difficulty is that it's always going to be talking to a chat, and therefore you never really know who you're talking to. And normally that chat is also managed by different people, because people leave. You think you're talking to Maria, and then that Maria actually left the company 2 years ago, and someone else is doing that. So that's why that actually, but it doesn't matter at that stage of finding the factory. That part doesn't matter as much. The key thing, I think, always, and when you talk to factories online, even by a chat, is the response time and the communications that matter more than whether you get the best price, because there's going to be issues eventually at some point. So if it's going to be someone that's offering the best price but very slow communication, I will not select that one. But there are obviously a lot of online platforms to get in contact with factories, or going around on fairs. There are fairs in Europe as well for your specific niche. Like the beauty fair in Italy was there recently. You have all these different fairs across the globe that is also closer by than instead of a Canton fair.
Okay, nice. I did have one other question on the inventory management point. Do you have any tips for Q4 planning? Because obviously brands typically, it's a big spike then. And
Yeah.
how do you plan for that if you're saying, 2 weeks prep time normally, or 2 weeks inventory in
Yeah.
normal periods? How do you kind of plan around Q4?
Yeah. Q4 is the outlier, I would say. So basically, it's no longer 2 weeks; it becomes 4 weeks of inventory, because the lead time tends to be longer. And it does require planning. And then the planning is mainly in getting the raw materials in place so that you don't either lose enough of your investment if you don't sell, or you have at least a backup that goods can be there within a few days. For the bigger brands, we will advise them to also look for local fulfillment, especially if they do really well in one destination, and have that right mix in place. So there's active communication when to turn on China fulfillment, when to turn it off, on country level, on product level, on order level. So these kind of nuances become very specific, very detailed. That's always a conversation to really max out their Q4. Most of the time, that's something that the ones that have done a Q4 before, they know by now because we told them. But for the ones that are new, it's always a little uneasy to have these kind of conversations with factories because they never had the factory conversation in this way. They're not sure if they fully understand. So then sometimes we pick up the phone and we talk directly to the factory to explain what our plan is and what the client wants, just to be able to help to resolve the issue. Q4, stock up more, look for local fulfillment, find the right mix. I do think that this year Q4 is going to be a good one for online sellers, simply because the tariffs have impacted the supply chain. Goods are still stuck in China. They haven't left yet. There's sometimes the factory doesn't want to ship it out because they are squeezed on the price, or the brand is waiting and holding it off, or there's not enough availability for the boat in itself to go. Christmas cutoff to get goods in retail, it needs to be there August, latest September, for it to reach the retail itself in November, December, and onwards. That's going to be a very squeeze at the very tight. So that means that some goods are not going to be available offline, which then people still want to buy the products and go look for it online. So I do think Q4 this year actually could be a very big one for e-commerce brands, bigger than most people would have expected, just because the uncertainty was so big in the last 2 months that it's hard to predict. But we see that there's going to be almost a little kind of COVID squeeze that we had then is going to happen in Q4. So being prepared for it with either local inventory or just having optimized supply chain, having the factory aligned with your with the goods that you don't have time enough for to have it locally, but to still continue selling.
Okay, interesting. The $1 million question, though, is, you're saying 4 weeks. How do you forecast that demand for a period where,
Yeah.
typically you're hoping, Q4 is going to be a bumper year this year, but how do I know that?
Yeah, review every week. So it's a rolling forecast. It's not a fixed forecast. And a rolling forecast means as well that what you predicted a week ago might be different the next week. So then you adjust. This style, this SKU is going to go up, this one's going to go down. And you kind of play with that. So it's not per se these 4 weeks is based on your daily order volume for the last 10 days. That's what we normally take, the daily order volume for the last 10 days. We take as the metric to predict your inventory for the upcoming weeks. So obviously, if there's a change in that, that means that your production goes off as well. So it's something that during Q4, the return on investment on time to monitor that on a weekly basis really outweighs of just ignoring it and thinking there's sufficient inventory.
For sure. Okay, Simon, before we round things off, I imagine you see across a lot of brands and you see deep into them. I just want to ask some questions that are perhaps more general, and it's mainly around success. And my first one is, out of brands that you see scale from 7 to 8 figures and beyond, what are the common threads there?
First of all, what they tend not to do is to be very proud with their achievement. They continue to hustle once they've achieved success, or what they define as success. Second is that they think it depends all on them to make it a long-term brand, which then means they want to do everything. They want to stay involved with everything. They're going to be the one deciding the last bits of everything. And that's kind of slowing them down tremendously. So being willing to let other people handle your operations and letting the ball drop now and then finding out that your brand is not gonna disappear that easily, because once you've reached that scale, it's not gonna disappear that easily by just one ball drop. But yeah, to be able to give out your team and build a team around you to be able to scale, because that's that. And the third one is that by doing that, your personal well-being is no longer defined by the success of the business or the failure of the business. And that's something that is very key, because entrepreneurship is great because it pushes you to become a better version of yourself, to explore what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and to be able to just become better in everything. But too many are defined by what their business does. So they have a bad day with their ad account, they feel bad, and it reflects on their surroundings. So it is kind of also a mindset thing, where I'm also really actively helping our clients to also not just be all in on business, but be all in on life. And what does that look like if you're all in on life? Tends to be that what we've seen, the ones that go all in on life actually do much better on the business side as well, which is always a little bit hard for somebody to let go of the baby that they build up, and they and really feel that that's part of them, and it is, but it doesn't define them. And I think that's something that we've seen too often happening in the ecom space in itself. Not just typically our clients, but in the ecom space itself. Showing off numbers, showing off results, showing off trips, showing off in general, and for whose benefits, to basically build up a dream that actually makes someone feel miserable in the end, by the end of the line. And I think that's the very careful nuance where we feel like having limited clients, we have probably serve 100 plus clients, but really be on their side. They call us when they feel down. And then we have the ability to also talk to them and make them uplift their day and put things in perspective, so that they can are energized again to build a long-term global brand. And it's ups and downs, and you hear too many of the ups and not enough of the downs. And luckily we get these stories so we can help them navigate that. Yeah.
Very cool. I really like that, the phrase, go all in on life. Can you unpack that and just give some advice around how you would advise someone to go all in on life?
Yeah, this is always a customized approach, because it really depends on what your definition is of being all in on life. Too often we use these checklists. I need to go to the gym. I need to get my supplements. I need to check this. I need to do that. I need to do that. And while you're there drinking a coffee with your mom, you're thinking about what is still not ticked off your list, right? Then I had this conversation with one of our clients, and then I coached him along the way, and now he's sitting with his mom, and recently he had a genius idea just by being present in the conversation with his mom, and his mom opened up an opportunity for his business that he implemented the next day, because he didn't think about this, because he was present in that conversation. It helped him so much to actually continue the relationship with his mom, but also to come up with new ideas of being just off for a little bit, taking a walk. And the problem we have, and everyone has, is if you sit still, you're not productive. But that's a question mark. Is that really the case, that you're not productive when you're not doing anything? And that is a game changer once you start to unpack that you don't have to do 14 hours a day of work to be able to run a successful e-commerce brand. It can be done in less. And that's what that looks like for you. And what are the first things to start with is really set on your childhood, and you go very deep on everything that has set your programming. Your internal programming is defined by how you grew up, about the people around you, your current situation as well. So there's no plug and play solution, but I really hope we can help many of our clients to proceed exploring their potential outside of the business to be able to grow their business.
Very powerful. So the business is often a reflection of you, right? And you could be the bottleneck holding it back.
Most of the time you are. Probably 99% of the time the bottleneck is is the owner of the business.
And ironically, in the situation you just described, working 14 plus hours a day, you probably think the opposite if you're that person.
Yes, 100%. Yes. It's never you. You're always fixing someone else's stuff, others, people mistake. If it wasn't you, you would not be where you are. You have this kind of programming, which is very normal, right? Because it comes from a hustle into success. And then how does that success look like going forward? I do believe that everyone should have this period of hustle to make something successful. It's never going to be overnight. It takes dedication, effort, energy, everything. And but once you get there, then what? And that then what is very challenging for something that wants to remain long-term relevant in the game.
And you've got to do that painful work, right, to figure that out.
Yes, you have to. Yeah.
Okay.
Or you sell your brand and you move on to the next, but you never solve it then. That's going to come up at some point somewhere.
I was just going to say, you just kick the can down the road, right?
Yeah. So that's what I really like about EcomOps. So I'm more on that spectrum where I'm helping brand owners with that mindset, mindfulness, while the CEO of the company, Dayu, is actually having his own beauty brand on the side to be able to understand what are the real struggles of a brand owner running it, going international, supply chain, what are the limitations for the products itself, how does the advertising work, how do I can actually do this better first, me, and then take my learnings and put that into a case study that our clients can use. So we're both approaching it from a different angle, each from our own strength, I would say, where he's much more a brand builder that has been leveraging supply chain, and I'm me more from a psychological point of view, I would say.
Yin and yang.
Yeah, well, his last name is Yang, so that makes my first name Ying then.
Very cool. Simon, I think that's a great place to end it. Very powerful, a lot of information that people can kind of take away and implement. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can businesses find out more about you, and what type of brand should get in touch?
Yeah. So for me, LinkedIn is the best way to connect, actually. That's where I'm most active. For Dayu, the CEO, the X, so just look for Dayu Yang, Dayu, and then Yang, Yang. So and then we have YouTube on EcomOps. On YouTube, we're there, so you can find our names there. We have been running a podcast on educating China fulfillment and supply chain as well. So any podcast app, you can find more about that. What we are really, really looking for are global D2C brands that are producing in China. So Western brands produce their products in China. They want to optimize the shipping. They have 50 orders a day minimum, and they have a limited number of SKUs. That's kind of our bread and butter, and that's what we tends to focus on and help them the best. And that's the other. So if that's you, then do reach out. We're happy to have a conversation and see how we can fit everything in and optimize the supply chain. It's not just purely on pricing. It goes far more than just the fulfillment itself.
Perfect. Well, yeah, Simon, like I said, thank you so much for coming on and sharing that information. Been a pleasure.
Yeah, same. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks.
Scaling an ecom brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.